Once you have your shell customized exactly the way that you want it, it's pretty annoying if you discover that that isn't your default login shell. This video will show you how to change that. The first thing you'll probably notice is that right now I'm logged into DM, or the Dance Marathon server, instead of the Myth server, which is one of Stanford's public servers. The reason is because on Myth they do things a little bit differently, and we'll see how they do it in a bit. My relationship to Dance Marathon is through the Dance Marathon Hackathon, a 24-hour coding for nonprofits marathon that I've been involved with for a few years. Now on to business. The most basic way to change your login shell is with the chsh command. That stands for change shell. If you run chsh, then it'll prompt you to log in, and then it'll ask you for the shell that you want to change to. So here I'm already set to Z shell, and that's what I want, so I'll just type in Z shell. But you can put in any binary that it'll run. In other words, if you go to /bin, then you can see in here there are some things like Z shell, there's also sh, or the normal default shell, there's probably bash somewhere up here, and you can install any shell that you want, and you just have to give it the path to that when you say chsh. However, chsh is really just a wrapper to edit the password file that contains the login information for all the different users. You can also, if you have sudo access, manually edit that. So here, if I say vi/etc/password, and that is passwd, then you can see all of the users on the system, and then you can see there are a few things like the user ID, and all of the different fields are colon separated, and here you can see my home directory, and then at the end there is the login shell. So if you just change this to whatever you want and then save it, then that'll do exactly what you want, and the next time you log in, it'll be exactly the same as if you had run the chsh command. However, if you want to actually do anything, if you want to save instead of just looking at the file, you will need to run it under sudo or superuser do. So I would need to say sudo vi/etc/password, and I would need the root login, or I would need to have sudo privileges, and then when I actually go in and edit this, I can actually save it. I mentioned that I wasn't doing that on Stanford's public servers. Now I'm going to show you why I wasn't doing that on Stanford's public servers. Let me log out of this. And I just closed the SSH to the Dance Marathon server. Now let's look at what's inside the password file. My username isn't in here. In fact, there are only 36 entries, even though the entire Stanford campus has accounts on this server. The reason for that is because the authentication for Stanford and the default login stuff isn't all done in the normal Linux way. As a result, you have to use whatever default shell that they give you as your login shell, which means you kind of need to use a hack around it. And just to show you that chsh doesn't work, when I run chsh, it says can only change local entries, use ypchsh instead, and if you do that, that doesn't work either. The hack is to use whatever the startup file is for the default shell, and to have that execute the other shell. So for instance, the default shell on the Stanford Myth machines is csh, C shell. And the first thing that C shell does when logging in is it runs the .login file. So if I go into .login, there's a default one that has a bunch of options and stuff set, but the very first line that isn't commented out is if-f bin zsh. So this is saying if I can find zsh, if zsh is installed on this system, then exec bin zsh. Exec is a system call that will replace the current process with the executable that you specify here. So that's saying replace the current process, in other words C shell, with Z shell. And this is functionally equivalent to actually just running ZSH normally. And you can, again, do this with whatever shell you want. So you could do this with bash instead if you prefer bash. To review, we talked about 3 ways of changing your shell. The first, which is the good way, is to use chsh, which stands for change shell. The second way is to edit /etc/password. The third is to add an exec in your login file. And now you will never again have to use C shell.